Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you today with an article from the Daily Signal dated November 10th. It says Mamdani's far-left playbook will be replicated across the country. And I feel bad for New York still. You guys are in a lot of trouble with this nut job taking over. So it says, is America about to be hit with a Mamdani-style socialist tidal wave? It says that's what more than a few Americans are thinking as the dust settles on the unnerving election of socialist Democrat Zoran Mamdani in New York City. And don't forget, Islamist too. Says, make no mistake, his faction of the Democratic Party absolutely has momentum after the win. So right now, much of the national political discourse is focused on the meaning of Mamdani. Says, I grew up in California, the Bay Area, and got used to fringy, leftists in the local government. Says, but to see an American city as massive and iconic as New York fall under the sway of a man fond of quoting Karl Marx is certainly a significant event. How did this happen? Will this playbook truly be replicated elsewhere? Is this style of politics truly the future of the Democratic Party? Because to answer those questions, we have to first diagnose how Mamdani pulled off this victory. And of course, next section is how Mamdani won. It says, was it just Mamdani's consistent message of affordability and his endless promises of free things that won the day? Was it all because of the arrival of hordes of young, college-educated wokes to the city? This graph certainly paints a dramatic picture. New York, the old New York, would almost certainly not have voted for him. Oh yeah, I've seen this. Or it says, embedded tweet, I can't pronounce the name of that person, is it Cremieux or something? It says, Mamdani won due to transplants and lost among people from New York City. Yeah, so you can see that there, and if you want to go ahead and check out that chart for yourself, the article is linked in the description below. It says, did Mamdani win because of the massive surge in Muslim voters in the city? I would guess so. It says, there are now more Muslims than Jews in the Big Apple. Are the politics of the city simply becoming like London? And it sure looks like it. That is not a good thing. Or perhaps at the end of the day, Mamdani just got lucky. The son of a Bollywood producer ran a slick campaign, focused on a few issues that were important to a large cross-section of voters, and defeated not one but two flawed candidates, one of whom literally left the governor's office in disgrace and ran a particularly low-energy campaign. That translated into low voter turnout, where nearly 60% of registered voters stayed home. Jesus Christ, that is a lot of people. As Mamdani captured the majority of those who did vote and probably would have won had he only been facing one opponent, but the race was still surprisingly quite close given the success of other Democrats on Election Day. The answer to Mamdani's victory may truly be a combination of these things, but what's notable is that some of these elements have been in place in other cities where Democratic Socialists of America and other leftist radicals have already successfully infiltrated the Democratic Party establishment and elected far-left mayors and other officials. And I think they're going to go ahead and maybe talk about Seattle, because that happened there too. It says this is mostly about the collapse of the old ruling order in the Democratic Party that can no longer contain its most radical elements, and they emboldened them after AOC won because Nancy Pelosi was scared of the squad and she just kind of kowtowed to them, and hey, they've taken over now, and that is not a good thing. So the next section here says a playbook used before. And the author said he asked Fox News columnist David Marcus, who I have read a bunch of his articles from The Federalist mostly, but he works at Fox News now. He's done a masterful job covering elections across America if he thought Mamdani's playbook could be used elsewhere, and he gave an interesting answer. He says it may be the other way around, Marcus wrote to me. Portland, Minneapolis, Seattle, for example, all saw the Democratic Socialists of America, or similar groups, seize the low-hanging fruit of local politics to eventually get far-left mayors. That process has taken longer in New York City because power was more entrenched, but today the old political machine in New York City not only couldn't stop Mamdani, many endorsed him. That's an excellent point. As Marcus said, we've already seen radicals take over other cities. They have typically done this by either co-opting or sidestepping the traditional Democratic Party apparatus. In the end, once the left-wing candidate secures victory, the party rallies around in support, as they are doing so now with Mamdani. And here's the Seattle part that I had mentioned earlier. The Seattle's Katie Wilson, a left-wing community organizer, is locked in an extremely tight race with incumbent Democrat Bruce Harrell for mayor. And by the time you're reading this, it has already been decided she actually did win the election. And I know the article says here votes are still being counted. We're going to skip that for now. And says, what's remarkable is that she is on the left flank of Harrell, who recently argued that a person who is arrested 7 or 8 times might be committing crimes because he is hungry. I hate that socialist argument. No, you commit crimes, you're bad. Okay? Says this movement is about purity and faith as much as it is about gaining power. Says Portland rejected one left-wing mayor who sided with radicals before they turned on him. I believe they're probably referring to Ted Wheeler there. Maybe if I scroll over the link, it'll say it doesn't, but I would guarantee that's who it was. But ended up going back to an even further left-wing one in 2024. as hopeless times there are in the Emerald City. And of course, perhaps the biggest coup of all for the socialist left is Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, who was elected in 2023. At the time, Al Jazeera said that Johnson's victory electrified the left. These days, having electricity at an affordable price in Chicago is a serious problem for a mayor whose approval rating is by many measures the lowest in the entire country. It says, and that should be a sign of what is to come if these candidates keep winning. Next section here says, true socialism tried again. It doesn't work and it never will, but let's see what this says. Mamdani and Johnson-style leftists are definitely on the rise and have a real shot at taking over cities with favorable political dynamics. But their disastrous mismanagement leaves behind yet another pathetic example of real socialism being tried. This somewhat amusing profile of Johnson in Vital City, comparing him to Mamdani, touches on the reality of socialist rule. It says Johnson's tenure has been, by nearly every measure, a disaster, the publication noted. Johnson's unwillingness to reform spending has led to the most severe urban debt crisis in the country. It'd be one thing if current levels of government largesse produce top-notch city services. Unfortunately, few believe the city delivers competently on core responsibilities like transportation, infrastructure, or affordable housing, and half of city voters list taxes as a top concern. The result is a Johnson approval rating that sits between 14 and 25%. This is oof. It says in big cities with extremely favorable demographic and political conditions, the Johnson and Mamdani pitch may be a success. But how is their message and clear examples of failure going to appeal to Americans elsewhere? President Donald Trump said it best about this new, old movement on the left. It says, look, for 1,000 years, communism has not worked, Trump said on Fox News on Wednesday. It would have been like 2 Wednesdays ago from the time you're hearing this. And by the way, of course, I think we all know communism hasn't been around anywhere near 1,000 years. It's only been around for maybe like 100 in terms of governing things. And but as a concept, almost 200. So it says Trump is saying this, it's just communism or the concept of communism has not worked. I tend to doubt it's going to work this time. It's literally never worked, and that's the truth. And yes, it certainly is. What Mamdani and his ilk represent is certainly dangerous and shouldn't be underestimated. There is a much better chance they take over the Democrat national machinery now that they have had some major successes. It would not be a surprise if they made a serious play to take the Democrat presidential nomination in 2028. And that reminds me of a video I did fairly recently. I don't remember exactly where from here, but at the time you're listening to this would have been maybe sometime this month, as a matter of fact, or late last month, about how the DSA, or Democratic Socialists of America, they want to take over everything. And I would urge you to check that out to see like what they believe. Finishing this up, it says, but ultimately, if they stay the course on policy, they are doomed to fail. And of course, that's Mamdani and, the socialists, is we will now, sadly, have more test cases to prove that point. For many leftists, being mugged doesn't necessarily mean they will come to reality. And once they gain power, they are rarely willing to let it go. Chicago and New York are likely in for a rough future. But are Americans writ large willing to accept that failure? That's the bigger question to be answered. We shall see. So there you go. I don't think it's going to work because, as Donald Trump had said, it literally has never worked. So why the hell would it start working now? But, people hear stuff like what Zoran's saying about free stuff, which isn't a thing. Somebody still has to pay for all that free stuff. And they just go, oh, okay. And I think I've said this before, that it's like a middle schooler's idea of a good candidate is just like, you're going to get all this free candy or something, and people just vote for him, even though it's like you can't actually do the things you're doing. And he's already been shot down on stuff before he even takes office, where they've already said like half the things that he wants to do he can't actually do. But there you go. New York, you voted for it, and now you get to live with it. So let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.